start by explaining the Kalpulli. Last time we talked about the ceremony of the 4 arrows.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and how that spiral ended up at Chaco Canyon, which Chaco Canyon now is kind of like, they've realized that it was a lot bigger than they thought, and that it was a lot, you know, that there were 4-story high structures, which was always a controversy in terms of some architects were saying, well, the adobe couldn't have withstood those biggest structures or whatever, but now they've found out that that was true, and that there's hundreds of roads around, hundreds of miles of roads around Chaco Canyon, which is another clue that it was a Mesoamerican city. But anyway, they established their capital there, and also I read with interest that the archaeologists are saying that it seemed to be like a university, and different tribes would come there and do ceremonies together, which is another trait of the Mexica. And remember, this is that 1,020-year ceremony where they were, you know, traveling in a spiral and set up their community at Chaco Canyon. But that also is for the Mexica oral tradition, you know, the story of the 4 arrows, is the place where they left to go reestablish their city in Mesoamerica. And so, what's it, I think 1325 is when they established their city. There's a long story of their trials and tribulations going down, and you know, where they started to eat the prickly pear cactus as they went down, and they were led by Tenoch, and their figure, because they weren't gods like they're explained. They're more like how the Greeks had essences. But if you read in the history books, Huitzilopochtli is the god of war, is when I read, you know, when I first read the sources there. And it developed that Huitzilopochtli was the force of human will. And in Nahuatl, he's hummingbird to the left. And I think I mentioned this, that that's your heart, and your heart's always in movement, and you don't want your heart to stop. But now they're saying that maybe he just, Huitzilopochtli represents just movement. Movement and evolution. But anyway, that's just the development of the concept.
So from war to will to movement.
And I think it is movement because, you know, I hope you come to the Sundance, but if you come to the Sundance, you'll hear the dancers shout out, Tiawi Mexica. And Tiawi means forward, but was always their battle cry, or their, you know, you move forward no matter what. And that's life, right? It's movement. That's what we are. We're alive, and we move, and you move through your life. Now, as I'm 75, you get older. If you stick around, you get older, but you can see definitely phases in your life, and you know, times you developed and whatever. But anyway, not to digress too much, that's when they got to the valley there. The older cultures had forgotten about the ceremony, or very few people remembered. So they were like, oh, here are these newcomers. And when you read the history books, they'll call these people the Chichimeca. And they characterize them as barbarians because they dressed differently and wore different clothes. I guess like the barbarians in Europe were different tribes and spoke different languages. But anyway, that reinforces the idea that there were these people that traveled the whole continent, you know, intermarried or, you know, kept continuing, and that's who was in Chaco Canyon at that time. And their movements were always dictated by the stars, the Great Eagle Bowl. And, you know, it contains really a lot. I'm not a mathematician or a scholar in it. That description that was in Mestizo Magic, you know, with the showing how the 13 days and how no days are repeated, and that took me a long time to get that together and correct or whatever. But we're hoping to bring up scholars from Mexico who understand the calendar and can, you know, you give them your birth date and they'll find it in the calendar, and then they do like this, kind of like horoscoping, but it's a little bit different. It's and they tell you, they can show you the plot of your whole life, but they tell you, but remember you have choice, and that you can change that trajectory or whatever. You know, you always have the input, and that's refers to the red road, native spirituality. Well, that's a time from when you're born till you die. It's your earth walk. And just like how your birthday is unique and won't be repeated in the calendar, you won't be repeated. This is like a special experience because, you know, where we come from, another dimension when you're born, you come from another place, and that's where you go when, or, you know, there's actually 9 dimensions that they have in Mexica philosophy. 9 levels, yeah. And which kind of corresponds to quantum physics of the 9 universes that you live in at the same time, but you're not aware or whatever, you know. I'm not quite...
Is it called parallel?
Yeah, kind of that theory, yeah. That's the kind of metaphysics that the Mexica had. But anyway, getting back to when they finally got back, and here are these older cultures, and you know, they're saying that the Olmec culture is maybe 6,000 to 7,000 years old now, because it keeps getting older. They just found in Central America that what they thought were natural formations turned out to be these elevated roads that the Mayas could walk on during the rainy season, and that they had these mounds that they also thought were natural formations, but they found that they were layered with pottery, so they're super fertile. And they even did an experience where they, you know, put seeds in those, and they were still fertile now after thousands of years. But anyway, because of that, they added 20 million more people, Mayans, that were in Central America, because before they believed because of the rainy season and they couldn't grow crops, and you know, but now they're finding out that it was much more extensive, that they were able to be there, and I forget how many, it was 400 and some new cities they found, because of the, you know, the advanced kind of observance and how you can see through trees and whatever, see in the ground or whatever. So yeah, it's that's what's happening right now, is the understanding of how indigenous culture, when I say that, and when I say indigenous civilization, you won't see that anywhere. They don't want to credit here with civilization. And in fact, I just read a couple of books by native anthropologists, and they're really challenging the structure of anthropology and the idea of the Bering Strait theory. And that the head of the Smithsonian Anthropological department that was there for, I forget, 20 or 30 years. His theory was that it was around 3,000 years ago that they crossed the Bering Strait and came here. And if you had an earlier date, or if you disagreed with this professor, first of all, if you had an earlier date, you would get severe criticism, right, from within the academic community and blah, blah, blah. But also, it really stifled your career because you did, you know, and that's the way academia is set up.
You've got to conform.
Yeah, you know. That's the reason I didn't accept tenure and just couldn't do it, because it was like, look, Juan, you can be part of us, but you got to accept, you know, these principles. This is what we're about and whatever. And I agreed with some of them, some a little less, but it was just the idea that I had to, you know, conform. But that, I know that's what academia is about.
Yeah.
But now you have these native anthropologists that are questioning that and saying, even your idea of coming over on the Bering Strait 3,000 years ago is another example of what Columbus did when he said, I found a new world. You don't want to give the natives for credit for being here. And just last year there was that find here in New Mexico of 22,000 years, and now they have these sites where they're butchering mammoths and giant sloths and whatever that, what is it, what's the name for the period, the anyway,
Paleolithic.
yeah, Paleolithic period, the natives were already here. And there's some people now that say, hey, maybe it was 200,000 years ago. And there's, you know, they're finding things older and older, and they just found a place in South America that I think it was 100,000 years, where they, you know, they found the arrowheads or whatever. But anyway, yeah, that's the background with what I'm saying now. And this comes from the oral tradition of the Kalpulli Quecalco, which the reason they formed the Kalpulli there was that's where the ceremony was done for the 4 arrows. And so when they came up in 1981, it was the first time I ever heard about it. I had heard about Kalpullis, and I knew about Tlacaelel, but again, in the history books they go, oh, they were organized in Kalpullis and Mexico Tenochtitlan, but they were like the guilds in the Middle Ages. They were like, and they weren't anything like the guilds in the Middle Ages. But anyway, getting back to, they sent them to the swamps, but they looked there and they said, oh, there's plenty of frogs and snakes and fish here, and there's different cactuses that we eat and whatever. So yeah, we can do this. We can be here. But what they saw was the eagle on top of the cactus. And that was the sign from Huitzilopochtli that this is where you're to build our capital. So when Tenoch saw that, he says, here, this is the sign from Huitzilopochtli, and here is where we will build our capital. And from now on, we will all dress the same, and we will speak the same language, and we will call ourselves the Mexica, which is cosmic citizen. So they were doing that from knowing all the cultures in the north, right? And when you read the history books, they go, well, and they always call them the Aztecs, but they were not Aztecs, they were the Mexica. That was a name given to them by the Spanish. But they said so, you know, they said that, and that we're the cosmic citizens, but they were referring to everybody. But they knew that the earth rotated around the sun. You know, something like, I think it's 1,500 years before the Europeans, you know, finally settled out with Galileo and the church, that the sun orbited the earth. But they knew the other way around. And also, they felt that there's a concept called Mexicoyot. And you hear coyote there is the word for coyote. Coyote is a Nahuatl word. But Mexicoyot means that we're citizens of the whole earth. And we should have the freedom to be able to go anywhere that we could make it to on the earth, because we're one human family living on Mother Earth. So there, when he said that, and we will call ourselves the Mexica, he was referring to the whole world, to all of humanity. Now our Lakota brothers say that, and for their, they say that there's one race, the human race, and it comes in 4 colors: black, white, red, and blue. Although black and white are in colors, and they correspond to the 4 directions. And so when we Sundance, we observed that from the Lakota. And that splits, like the elder told me about the Sundance, the world's a circle, so anytime you designate a spot, that can be the center. Is a spiral, I mean, that can be the center. So when we start a fire for a ceremony, that becomes the center. And then because your prayers go out from that fire, and the sweat lodge is a really good example of that, because when they open the door to the lodge, that you could see the smoke come out and the steam come out, but those are your prayers, and they mix with the air, and eventually they travel throughout the whole world. Anyway, so they said fine, and what they did is they put dirt in canoes and started growing crops there, and that's Xochimilco, which is still in Mexico City, the gardens with the boats floating with flowers. Yeah, that's how they did their agriculture there, and they built their city. But here's an important part of our message, because we feel that this is inclusive. This is universal. That's another thing that's different about what we're saying. We're saying Native spirituality is universal. That it's just like any of the other great spiritualities. And I say spirituality because we're not a religion. We don't have a Bible. We don't have 10 Commandments. We have, some elders say, well, the earth is our Bible. But it's that idea again of the individual and your worth as an individual. So what the Mexicas did, they took that participatory democracy, which is that council system where decisions are made unanimously in men's and women's council. And this is my own research, but I haven't found an exception yet. When you look into the decisions that the men's and women's council makes for any clan, tribe, nation, confederation, you'll find that that respect for the individual is there, because you as an individual have veto power of that council, because they have to have consensus. Everybody has to agree. So here's again where that choice is one of the main principles for Native spirituality. If you find yourself in a situation where something in your heart and your mind, it's just, this doesn't feel right, I don't know, you know, there's what I've found 2 reactions to that. You could say, hey, you know, you guys, I wish you well, but I just don't feel right about this. I don't want to be part of this. I'm going to step back. Because you always have that choice, even in ceremony. You know, when I was sent out like this and I had to meet many tribes, they said, okay, be humble, show up for work, and have face. And like, what's having face? And be true to your word. If you say you're going to do something, do it. And that way you can integrate yourself anywhere in indigenous culture. You know, for us, it's like, it's a little different because, you know, you have your degree and you say, oh, here's my certification and this is who I am. You know, but for Native people, it's like to, like they said, to be humble. Like Acacio, who was the most powerful medicine man I ever met, and a great spiritual leader, was very humble. I mean, if he was here, he'd be sitting over there on the side and just listening humbly. And you know, I rode with him in Mexico on buses, and you wouldn't know he was anything special. And he would never, in our tradition, you don't say what you are. It's for the people to say who you are. So I would even be talking to him like here with you guys, and I would say, well, you know that, you're a medicine man, or, you know, you should know. And he would turn around like, who are you talking to? You know, you talking, and that's how my reaction, I would kind of go, oh, okay. Because he said, it's for the people I heal to say that I'm a medicine man. Not for me. And, you know, it's that kind of humility that's different for us. That's why humility is still a really positive trait in Native culture. Not in our culture. If you're humble, that means you're the bottom of the barrel, you have no status, you have no power. But in Native culture, that's like, for me, if there was an elder that came to the Sundance and said, Juan, you're a humble man. What a compliment. That was like, you know, and I've been complimented many different ways, but that was really a compliment for me. And because a humble person knows that they can still learn. You know, an expert, someone, he already knows it all, right? And I'm, you know, it's not really that way because I understand what science is. And it's not a religion, and it's, you know, it's looking at data, it's observation, and then sometimes those theories or that data changes and things change. It's like everything else that has validity. It's something that changes and isn't static. That's one lesson we learned from Mother Earth, right?
Yeah.
That she's not static. And you're part of that, so you're not, you know, again, the owie, that movement. You move ahead. One of the things that Akasi would always say, nobody is indispensable. We have a leader or somebody passes or leaves, we know what to do. We have a system, we have a spirituality. People are going to go. You're going to have tragedy, you're going to have whatever, but you keep moving forward. You don't just lie down, you know, you have to, life is for the living, and yeah, you keep moving. But anyway, getting back to the establishment of the Kalpulli. But all this stuff is like, yeah, it's reference, you know, and it's building a perspective of something that was right here all the time. But like in the 60s, when the Beatles brought the Maharishi, oh, everybody loved these. Oh, you know, there's where spirituality is. That's, you know, let's go over there and let's bring them here. And, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that, because Native spirituality believes there are many paths to the Creator. We're not the only way. It's just our way. You know, and that's part of this message, is that we just want to be able to keep doing our way. It's as old as any spirituality, and it serves as, I believe it serves as a model to how to live sustainably. What everybody's trying to do, but you know, how are we going to do it? How can we rid ourselves of plastic? How can we stop driving cars? How can, well, you know, you can just do it. But it's that radical change, and that's consciousness that we're trying to say it's, you know, it's here. And that's what's happening, I think. You know, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years ago, I would talk about this and people would, what? No. You know, no, the Plains Indians, there was nothing noble about them. This is what some historians told me. There's nothing noble about them. You had to go out and get a scalp from someone, so they were all murderers, because that's how they became men, or whatever. Now, the new research shows that when the Plains Indians had a conflict, if there was up to four deaths, that was considered excessive, and they'd bring the two councils together to have a solution that wasn't based in death. Because there's, just like there's a lot of respect for death, there's respect for, I mean, for life in Native culture, there's respect for death too. So, in fact, the Kasi used to say, you know that you've reached a certain level of enlightenment when you see birth and death equally. When you realize one's the start and one's the beginning, but actually one's the end of something. When you're born, and yes, you live this life, but the same is true of death. This is over, but you're going to where you came from. And also for the eagle and jaguar knights, they would pray that they would come back as butterflies, so that their whole lives would just be pollinating flowers, and they felt that was, I should have said, first they did this journey to the sun, and there in the sun they were purified, and then they came back, because it's like physics. We believe that you can't destroy energy or matter. There's just so much, and it's there, and it transforms. It doesn't disappear. And that's what we believe about our spirit, that your spirit never dies. That's eternal. Like what the Christians say the soul is, right? Your eternal soul. But we believe that we have a spirit. We believe everything has a spirit. Everything that's alive, and even the rock people, or the, you know, and if you think about it, they're moving, you know. The molecules are moving in them, and yeah, we're related to them, because we're all stardust, the cosmic citizen. So, when they organized their city, because they were already not related by blood, because they had come and, you know, they were those different people, and they came around, and here's 1,000 years some later, that they said, well, okay, now we're going to, let's form our social political system, the councils. Let's do our community, we'll call it a Kalpulli, which means actually home. But they said, instead of blood, let's do it as like-minded people. So see, right there, that takes away that genetic element, or that blood element. It was like-minded people. And that's how Mexico Tenochtitlan was organized in Kalpullis. And you could have a spiritual Kalpulli, a merchant Kalpulli, agricultural Kalpulli, artistic Kalpulli, a hedge fund Kalpulli. You know, you could do it. No more than 20 families. And that's because that system of councils works really well and efficiently when you have 20 people. Because you'd have a representative from each family in the men's council and the women's council. So that was 20 people, and having worked with different councils, yeah, when you get over 20, it starts to get longer and it's harder. It's just harder for everyone to speak and everybody to keep their attention or whatever. But 20 works well. So Kalpullis are a limit of 20 families. Now, it doesn't say how few families, so maybe you could have 2 families, 3 families, 4 families. We've changed that to families and individuals because our society's changed. Before, everything was family, but now, you know, there's individuals too. So that's one of the few changes that we've made with the Kalpulli. So you have that system that can be done anywhere. And that's our next step, is hopefully to start to get Kalpullis hemispherically and internationally. And like I probably mentioned this before, when the Kalpulli came up, and they came up to get the Sundance Fire to take it back to Mexico after 500 years, which I thought, no, that sounds impossible. But also to come up and to spread this, to say that this was what Anahuac was. And Anahuac was the Mexica Confederation, the Confederation of Anahuac, and it stretched from Nicaragua, which last time I said was in our language, Nicanahuac. Here's where Anahuac ends. And from Nicaragua north, the eagle is the sacred bird, and from Nicaragua south, it's the condor. And that's the eagle and the condor, but it was the blue eagle of the Inca Confederation with the red eagle of the Confederation of Anahuac. But see, that was the whole hemisphere. That included the whole hemisphere with the Inca and and all the people that were around. You know, we still have the Iroquois Confederation in New York, and that's how natives were organized in confederations. Because again, a Kalpulli is self-sufficient, independent, and self-governing. So that's any clan, tribe, nation, and confederation you want to look at. They're all that way. They're all self-sufficient, independent, and self-governing. But we're all within clans and blood. You know, they're your cousins, your aunts, your whatever. Which also isn't that good for diversity, that kind of inbreeding. Although it's not true that they were isolated, different, that were fighting all the time. There was extensive trading, all the way up through Canada for Mesoamerica. Right here, and you'll probably hear me say this many times, but here for the Pueblos, they have macaw, parrot, feathers, and they like the big sea turtle shells for their turtle dance. And those ceremonies are thousands of years old. And they've been trading with Mesoamerica for that long. And right here is a special place, because here is the gateway to the plains. And the Pueblos would trade with the Mexica, and then they would go to where the Cherry Creek and the Platte River meet, which is Denver, which was a huge gathering and trading area, and they would trade there. And that was the Plains culture. That's what the United States government and Hollywood portrayed as native culture. Now, when you talk to foreign people, or even people here in the United States, well, what is native culture? Oh, they lived in teepees and they were nomadic and they followed the buffalo. It's like, I like to say, it's like if Western culture, if they cut out the Greeks and the Romans, and you started somewhere there in Europe with the tribes and how backward they were, if that's where Western civilization, they said, oh, this started there. And no, we forgot about the Greeks and the Romans. Well, that's how native culture is portrayed to native people and also to the general public. But anyway, that's a message that we're taking. We're saying, no, look, we can look at the Mexica model, and it's the same as your social political structure. The only thing, it's not based on blood. It's based on like-minded people. And also, remember your philosophy about how there's just one race. We can't like discount our other brothers and sisters, our relatives. You know, we've got to see that we're related. You know, and for Native America, that's really hard because what happened? I was just reading a book and they were talking about how they're not sure, but 85 to 95% of the natives that were here before 1492 were gone after that. That's a pretty successful genocide, if you look at it that way. So, you know, that's another reason, the value, it shows you the strength of Native culture, that it's survived. And like I was talking about last time, it's survived through the oral tradition and through secrecy. And like in Ancient Spirit, Living Word, when Tlacaelel gives the message of Cuauhtémoc, that's like for all Native people. That's what they said. Now we're gonna hide because our son is gone. We realize we've been conquered. You know, the devastation that they went through, but our son will come. And that happened in 2012. That was the end of the fifth son, and now we're in the sixth son. This is a new son. The count has started again. The world didn't end, or whatever, and the calendar didn't end. The count just starts over again, and now we're in the count of the sixth son. So we're trying to tell all people, hey, we have a new son here. We have a new 12,000 year period where we can develop our consciousness so that we can survive. So the Kalpulli was made up of those 20 families, or a limit of the 20 families. So then, after you formed your Kalpulli, you looked around at the Kalpullis around you, and when you had 20 Kalpullis, you had Kalpultan. And that was that you sent one representative from each Kalpulli to form a council, right? That you could have 20 Kalpullis working together. So that you could have larger groups. And then when you have 20 Kalpultans, that's how it was structured. And it was like the elders, it's like a pyramid. With the base is the people, and each council is another step on there. But it represents that larger group. But and this is the hard part, and this is the hard part for me. It wasn't a hierarchy, and it wasn't a majority rule. It was actually the people ruled through their Kalpullis. Another thing that Native culture had was that they had accountable leadership. So the Kalpullis were organized, right? But they were self-sufficient, so they had silos with food and whatever, and they would have people come around and check to make sure that they had enough for the next year, you know, that the Kalpulli was functioning okay, and it was functioning in coordination with the rest of the Kalpullis and the whole city. But if the Kalpulli's provisions were low, or it was, you know, there was a problem, it was that ranking official that was punished. It wasn't the Kalpulli. Another example I like to, more stark example of this is that they had pulque, right?
Yeah, what?
Pulque. It's like a beer. They fermented out of what is it? Which plant is it?
Agave.
Agave plant. You know, they make like a beer, and they make mezcal, which is like format. Tequila's a little bit more refined mezcal. But anyway, if you were caught drunk in the city, you were put in a harness thing with a stockade or whatever, and people could go by and they could, you know, criticize you or say, oh, you know, you shouldn't have been drunk or whatever. If you were an elder, no, it didn't matter. You're an elder, you could do what you want. But again, if you were an official, if you were a priestess or a priest or were a jaguar knight or an eagle knight, you were put to death. See, it was like the opposite of ours, where the most powerful had the most stringent penalties.
Yeah.
While if you're just a regular person, you know, you're not going, because isn't that true? If you have the power, if you're the one that should take responsibility. Of course, for us, we've lived in this other system for so long that it's, you know, and that's the thing that I ask you to entertain, is think about that, if we had that kind of a system.
Wow.
Another thing about indigenous culture, the most severe punishments weren't for murder or robbery or any other of the things that humans indulge in. It was for lying. Because you need the truth to move forward. You need the truth if you're going to provide for your community, for your Kalpulli for next year. You need to know the truth about what's happening. So that was, lying was considered the biggest offense. Because you would say, you know, the red road is the road towards the light, and that light is truth. So it was a system that was different than ours, but also was a system that was sustainable.
Wow, so the Pueblo, would that be considered a Kalpulli?
Well, no, they're organized in their clans. They're kivas, really. They're kivas, but it's essentially the same. You know, they have the men's and the women's councils, and that's where the decisions come out of. That's the social political structure. That's like, and that's what I want to do next week, is actually talk about the council system, but actually we'll make a council. I haven't figured out what question we're going to address, but everybody will have an opportunity to see that different kind of democracy, that feminine kind of democracy, where everybody gets to speak. It's not a situation, you know, in our system, there's a lot of people never get to say a word or don't want to say a word or whatever. You don't know what they're thinking. In the council system, everyone has their chance to speak. And then also when you're there, you hold a sacred object, and that's to remind you to tell the truth. But also, you have the floor. And no one is supposed to speak while you're speaking. So speak as long as you want. You don't have to speak. You can take it and say no thank you or a how, and you just pass it to the next person. You're not forced to speak. But everybody gets to listen. You know, when I first went into a council, I was interpreter, and they said, oh, we know you were a professor and you're a filmmaker and whatever, but here, you don't have anything to say in here. You're just an interpreter. And then when I went in, you know, well, they start a fire. It's a ceremony. That's another thing. When I first got involved with this, I talked to an elder, and he said, oh, even our politics are sacred. And I was a political activist, came out of the Crusade for Justice in Denver, and I thought, no, politics is not sacred. It's the most backstabbing whatever. But I learned that, yeah, if you do it in a ceremony, and you hold a sacred object, and you're obliged to tell the truth, and I was told, be a hollow bone, empty your mind and empty your heart. Empty your mind so you can really listen, so you're not having that internal dialogue, or you're thinking, oh, how am I gonna rebut this? Or what am I gonna say? Or, how do I feel about this? Just, no, empty it, and empty your heart so you can empathize with the person you're listening to. So that's a different situation than a debate, where, I gotta make these points or whatever, and then they have judges or whatever to decide, they won the debate. They won the debate, so what they says has more credibility. But they could just be a better debater, and, good debaters make up references sometimes. if they can get away with it, they'll do it. It's a contest, and you win that contest. A council's about finding out what's best for our community, what's best for our children. The children are always the focus. Picasso used to say, the Creator sees through the eyes of small children. So it's our responsibility to make a beautiful world for them. Because that pleases the creation, but it's also, that's the Creator's eyes, our little children, those innocent eyes, what they're seeing. So make a beautiful world for them. With your clothes and whatever you do. And you see that in Mexico, in the poorest areas where they've got the houses where, you could see through the slats like that, and the floors are dirt, they're all swept, and they have little cans with flowers there, and, they'll put some pictures up or whatever. They're always trying to make it beautiful. And then also the women's apparel in Mexico is so beautiful, but it gives their spiritual status and what village they're from, and it has all this information that they wear, and it's like beautiful, and they wear that all the time, their traditional dress. It's not just for Sundays or whatever. It's there, but that beauty for the children. And also I was going to mention that in my research I found that the most important decisions for a community come out of the Women's Council. Whether there's going to be some sort of conflict, whether it's time to migrate, whether it's time, we're going to change this, it came out of the Women's Council. Why? Because that's Mother Earth. When I went to grade school, they said, the king of beasts, the lion, was a king of beasts, and they did everything, and all the pride was subservient to them. And now that they've done the research, no, it's the female lions that do the hunting and decide when to go to the water hole and whatever, and the males are just kind of there. We're going to the water hole now, whatever. Look at nature. The ants, they're all sisters. Beehive, they're all, I wanted to do a t-shirt, I'm only a drone. But that was what was really different about Native culture too. Instead of oppressing the majority of the people, they used that intelligence and that strength that women have to make sure that their communities prospered. Because, and you see it today. I mean, it's just so graphic in what's happening in Europe. Let's go to war. Let's do that macho thing, and we're going to show you our army's better than your army or whatever. And that just the destruction and everything else is so futile. But that's what we do as countries. That's what we do because we are forgotten that balance. In the Mexica language, the word for the Creator is Ometeo, which is translated into Our Lady and Lord of Duality. And I even asked Nahuatl speakers, is it Our Lady first? No, it's Our Lady and Lord of Duality. So the idea of the Creator is the balance between the feminine and the masculine energy, but also that recognition that women have a strength that men don't have. And you know, I'll be talking to younger people or whatever, and I'll get the comment, well, you know, women aren't strong. And what about, you know, when they're on their period, they're emotional and whatever, you know, they can't make decisions right, and all that stuff. And I tell them, hey, if you don't think I'm right, go to the nursing home and see who's there. See who's there. See how many men are there and how many women are there, and see who's stronger. And also, Henry Crodog told me this, that a sun dancer is the same spiritual grade as a woman who's had a child. That's what the piercing is about. And also, when I went to my first Sundance, because I had done these films and I had been an activist, when I walked into the Sundance grounds, it was like, oh, you're gonna dance? And I was, oh, no, I'm just here to observe, right? I'm just here to help the Kalpulli out and whatever. But I was there, and some of the new Sundancers, the ones that there was first year, were there, and some women Sundancers came in, veterans, beautiful women, and they were, you know, doing the male thing, oh, look at that, you know, whatever, and they were making those comments. And I was just there, and I saw them and whatever, and I was following the advice of, you know, open your ears, open your eyes, and shut your mouth. So it was interesting. The fourth day of the dance, these new dancers were falling down. They were suffering. And it's a hard thing to go without food or water for that amount of time and to dance. It's a big commitment, but the women that they were talking of were going over there and lifting them up and taking them to the tree to rest at the tree, and we're fanning them and then going back, and by the fourth day the women are into it, man. They're just feeding off that spiritual energy. And for the men, it takes years for you to feel that, for you to free yourself of that fear of the physical or whatever, and then to understand what it's like to really feel the dance. You know, I've suffered from 3 bouts of sunstroke, so I can't dance anymore. So that was like, there was a time I was scared to dance. I admit that. It was like I had talked to doctor friends of mine, and they said, "Don't do that. That's horrible for you. You could die," and whatever. And it took me a while to get in that circle. But after dancing and getting over that initial thing, like those young men did, and really respecting that strength, and understand that women have a strength that men don't have. They have an intelligence that men don't have. They have a water, heart wisdom that men don't have. That native men would listen to their women. And it was the women that created that vision. And it was the man's responsibility to help create that and then protect that. You know, this idea of a chief, there were no chiefs. You know, you were of service. After you finish your 4 years sundancing, you receive a pipe, but you're told it's not your pipe, you carry it for the people. And the way it was explained to me is, you know what, if one of your kids is graduating and somebody calls you up and said, I need you. You know, come and do a pipe ceremony. Come and help me out. You have to go help that person, because if you're going to accept this pipe, you've got to put your desires and wants secondary to that of the community. And then you're told that service to the people is the highest calling. But that's the kind of leadership that was there. And that's why Native culture was sustainable. That's why they were such great agriculturalists. because women want to make sure that their kids are fed. They want to see the whole community fed. They want to see their parents fed and their grandparents fed. They want to see everybody happy. You know, so that was the lead that they took in our culture. And it was the Western culture, when they sent women as representatives from the tribes, the English, the French, the Dutch, whatever, wouldn't accept them. They said, no, you have to send the man. And that was, if you read the first encounters, that was the thing that they just freaked out about. Their women had equality and power. Oh, it was like, you know, that was the worst thing. That was the worst thing, because that was so different with what they had. But, you know, traditionally a pipe carrier would take his pipe and stand in front of anything that was coming to the tribe, and that the younger ones and the older ones could escape, and they would stand there with their pipe. Not with a weapon, but with their pipe. That's where they got they call it the peace pipe. Because they would want to smoke it after they did an agreement or whatever, because that would seal it. So it's that kind of society that, you know, I asked groups of people I talked to think about, what it would be like to have that kind of freedom, to have that kind of harmony, and just that, to get in tune with that dance of Mother Nature, that consciousness of hers. You know, I had an elder tell me, hey, Juan, you know what you need to do? It's going to help you, son. You get your mind in tune with Mother Nature's mind, because her mind is in tune with the cosmic mind. And at the time I didn't understand that, but boy, I sure understand that now. I mean, that's not an easy thing to do, but that is so true. That is so true. And for me, who came to this skeptical, and even the spirituality, you know, I was a scientific materialist and believed what Marx said, religion is the opiate of the people, right? And I thought, well, this is like native religion. Later I learned on that it wasn't, it's a spirituality. And that it wasn't like, oh, we're the only way, and you better follow us, because if you don't, you're going to be punished or whatever. No, we say, you know, this is our way. And we do no missionary work. If it appeals to you, you come to it. You know, we don't do that kind of thing. Although, for our children, and it's their free choice if they want to follow this spirituality. It's not like, oh, you follow this or you'll be disowned or whatever. And being raised a Catholic, I know what that means. And my mother sent money to the day she died to the St. Jude Foundation for the Saint of the Impossible, that I would come back to the church. You know, and I got letters from the St. Jude Foundation after she died, years after she died, you know, asking for a donation, because who knows how much money she spent to do that. But for us, it's our children's choice, right? I like to, an example of this, I like to talk about Crazy Horse. He would disappear for the Sundance. For some reason, he didn't want to participate, he's gone. There was stories, well, he did his own Sundance there, or he just chilled, he camped out, and then he came back. But that shows you it was a choice. And that's where his nickname, Our Strange Young Man, came from. He also had a nickname, Curly. So that means maybe he had some European blood if he had curly hair. But, you know, I just find that interesting. But that's an example of...
There's no peer pressure here.
It's your choice.
Respect.
Yeah, it's your choice. It's a, like, you know what? You have a right to think what you think and do what you do. And I respect that, and I even support that. But I also have a right to think what I think and to do what I think. And it's a different kind of egalitarian social pressure that's there, not that hierarchy again, where it's a lot easier to just fit in and take the orders and, you know, prosper that way than it is to do your own, to take your own responsibility. I was told that, like I like to end these talks, don't take my word for it. The Creator gave you a mind, use it and make up your own mind. And the elder told me that, and then I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, well, you know what? I don't know sometimes what I'm thinking. He says, well, that's your task. Find out what you really think. Find out who you really are, because then you can really make up your mind. Because then you have that intent, and you have that centeredness where you can. So, when I say that, make up your own mind, I realize that a lot of people don't know what they really think. They don't know what they really believe. They're still searching, or, but no, if you can really make up your mind, if you really can do that research, and then you know who you are, and you know who you think, what you think, and you know what you believe, well then, yeah, you can make that decision. You make that decision, and that's a real decision for you. But it's also, you've reached the point where you're starting to deal with your ego. You're starting to see, well, what am I really about? What do I really feel about this? To try to get in touch with yourself. And that most of us don't do that. It takes a lot of work.
And the natives, they would have circle, the dance, in a lodge, and all these ways to get, back with integrity, back in alignment. But did they practice things like meditation, or were there other kind of disciplines?
Oh, sure.
One did individually.
The Vision Quest is a 4-day meditation.
By yourself.
And yeah, you're by yourself, and there's no distractions.
Right.
And Robin and I do the Vision Quest together. We do kind of a traditional Vision Quest, where, you go up in a t-shirt and shorts, barefoot, and you have a blanket. And then if you have any sacred objects, you could take them. Things that you use to pray, you could take that, but that's it. That's it. And personally, what happens is that, after a while you're there and then you realize, oh man, there's no distractions. I can't pick up a book. I can't make a call. I can't watch TV. I gotta be here now. And